The Spider and the Toad from Wood Magic by Richard Jefferies. One morning, as little Sir Bevis, such was his pet name, was digging in the farmhouse garden, he saw a daisy, and throwing aside his spade, he sat down on the grass to pick the flower to pieces. A flutter of wings sounded among the blossoms on an apple tree close by, and instantly Bevis sat up, knowing it must be a goldfinch thinking of building a nest in the branches. If the trunk of the tree had not been so big, he would have tried to climb it once, but he knew he could not do it, nor could he see the bird, for the leaves and bloom. A puff of wind came and showered the petals down upon him. They fell like snowflakes on his face and dotted the grass. Bzzz! A great humble-bee, with a band of gold across his back, flew up and hovered near, wavering to and fro in the air as he stayed to look at a flower. Bzzz! Bevis listened, and knew very well that he was saying. It was, "This is a sweet little garden, my darling, a very pleasant garden, all grass and daisies, and the apple trees, and the narrow patches with flowers and fruit tree one side, and a wall and a currant bushes on another side, and a low box hedge, and ha, where you can see the high mowing grass quite underneath you, and a round summer house in the corner, painted as blue inside as a hedge sparrow is outside, and then another ha with iron railings, which you are always climbing up. Bevis on the fourth side, with stone steps leading down to a meadow, where the cows are feeding, and where they have left all the buttercups standing as tall as your waist, sir. The gate in the iron railings is not fastened, and besides, there is a gap in the box hedge, and it is easy to drop down to the ha wall. But that is mowing grass there. You know very well you could not come to any harm in the meadow. They say you were not to go outside the garden, but that's all nonsense, and very stupid. I'm going outside the gardens, Bevis. Good morning, dear. Bzzz. And the great humble-bee flew slowly between the iron railings, out among buttercups, and away up the field. Bevis went to the railings and stood on the lowest bar. Then he opened the gate a little way, but it squeaked so loud upon its rusty hinges that he let it shut again. He walked round the gardens, along beside the box hedges, to the patch by the lilac trees. They were single lilacs, which are much more beautiful than the double, and all bowed down with a mass of bloom. Some rhubarb grew there, and to bring it up the faster, they had to put a round wooden box on it, hollow out from the sound bud of an elm. One of the round wooden boxes had been split and spoiled, and half of it was left lying on the ground. Under this shelter a toad had its house. Bevis peered peer in at him, and touch him with a twig to make him move an inch or two, for he was so lazy and sat there all day long, except when it rained. Sometimes the toad told him a story, but not very often, for he was a silent old philosopher, not not very fond of anybody. He had a nephew, quite lively young fellow, in the cucumber frame on the other side of the lilac bushes, at whom Beefis also peered nearly every day after they had lifted the frame and propped it up with wedges. The gooseberries were no bigger than beets, but he tasted two, and then the thrush began to sing on an ash tree in the hedges of the meadow. Beefis, Beefis, said the thrushes, and he turned round to listen. Have you forgotten the meadow, and the buttercups, and the sorrel? You know the sorrel, don't you? That tasted so pleasant if you nibble the leaves. And I have a nest in the bushes not very far up the hedges, and you may take just one egg. There are only two yet, but don't tell any more boys about it, or we shall not have one left. That is a very sweet garden, but it is small. I like all this field to fly about in, and the shallow fly ever so much farther than I can, so far away and so high that I cannot tell you how they find their way home to the chimney. But they will tell you, if you ask them, Good morning, I'm going over the brook. Beefis went to the iron railings and got up 2 bars and looked over, but he could not yet make up his mind, so he went inside the summer house, which had one small round windows. All the lower parts of the blue walls was scribbled and marked with pencil, where he had written and drawn, and put down his ideas and notes. The lines were somehow intermingled, and crossed each other, and some stretches out long distance, and came back in sharp angles. But Beefis knew very well what he meant when he wrote it all. Taking a stump of cedar pencil from his pocket, he added few scrawls to the inscriptions, and then stood on the seat to look out of the round window, which darkened by an old cobweb. Once upon a time there was a very cunning spider, a very cunning spider indeed. The old toad by the rhubarb told Beefis there had not been such a cunning spider for many summers. He knew almost as much about flies as the toads, and caught such a great number that the toad began to think there would be none left for him. Now the toad extremely fond of the flies, and he watched the spider with envy, and grew more angrily about it every day. As he sat blinking and winking by the rhubarb in his house all day long, the toad never left off thinking, thinking about the spider. And as he kept thinking, so he told Beefis he recollected that he knew a great deal about a good many other things beside flies. So one day, after several weeks thinking, he crawled out of his house in the sunshine, where he did not like at all, and went across the grass to the iron railings, where the spider had got his web. The spider saw him coming, and being very proud of his cleverness, began to taunt and tease him. Your back is all over warts, and you are an old toad, he said. You are so old that I heard swallow saying their great 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 grandmothers, when they built in the chimney, did not know when you were born. And you have got foolish and past doing anything, and so stupid that you hardly know when it is going to rain, why the sun is shining bright, you stupid old toad, and there isn't chance of a single drop failing. You look very ugly down there in the grass. Now, don't you wish that you were me, and could catch more flies than you could eat? Why, I can catch wasps and bees, and tie them up so tight with my threads that they cannot sting nor even move their wings, nor so much as wriggles their bodies. I am the very cleverest and the most cunning spider that ever lived. Indeed you are, replied the toad. I have been thinking so all the summers, and so much do I admire you, that I have come all this way across in the hot sun to tell you something. Tell me something, said the spider, much offended. I know everything. Oh yes, honored sir, said the toad. You have such a wonderful eyes, and such a sharp mind. It is true that you know everything about the sun and the moon and the earth and flies. But as you have studied all the great and important things, you could hardly see all the very little trifles like a poor old toad. Oh yes, I can. I know everything. Everything. But sir, went on the toad so humbly, this is such a very little thing, and a spider like you, in such a high position of life, could not mind me telling you such a mere nothing. Well, I don't mind, said the spider. You may go on, and tell me if you like. The fact is, said the toad, while I have been sitting in my hole, I have noticed that such a lot of flies that come into this garden presently go into the summer house there. And when they are in the summer house, they always go that little round window, which is sometimes quite black for them, for it is a nature of flies to buzz over glass. I don't know so much about that, said the spider, for I've never lived in a house, being an independent insect. But it is possible you may be right. At any rate, it is not much of consequence. You had better go up into the windows, old toad. Now that it is now this was a sneer on the part of the spider. But I can't climb up into the window, said the toad. All I can do is crawl about the ground, but you can run up a wall quickly. Ah, how I do wish that I was a spider like you. Oh dear. And then the toad turned round, and having turned round after bowing to the clever spider, went back to his hole. Now the spider was secretly very much mortified and angry with himself, because he had not noticed this about the flies going to the windows in the summer house. At first he said to himself that it was not true, but he could not help looking that way now, window crowded with now and then, and every time he looked, there was the window crowded with flies. They had all the gardens to buzz about it, and all the fields, but instead wandering under the trees and over the flowers, they preferred to go into the summer house and crawl over the glass of a little windows, though it was very dirty from so many feet. For a long time the spider was too proud to go there too. But one day such a splendid bluebottle fly got in the windows and made it such a tremendous buzzing that he could not resist it any more. So he left his web by the railings and climbed up the blue painted wall over Beavis' writings and marks and spun such a web in the window as had never before been seen. It was the largest and the finest and the most beautiful web that had ever been made. It, it caught such a number of flies that the spider grew fatter every day. In a week time he was so big that could no longer hide in the crack he had chosen. He was quite a giant, and the toad came over across the grass one night and looked at him. But the spider now was so bloated he would not recognize the toad. But one morning a robin came to the iron railings and perched on the top, and he put his head a little on one side, to show his black eyes the better. Then he flew inside the summer house, alighted in the window, and gobbled up the spider in instantly. The old toad shut his eye and opened it again, went on thinking, for that was just what he knew would happen. Ever so many times in his very long life he had seen spiders go up there, but no sooner had they go fat than a robin or a wren came in and ate them. Some of the clever spider web was there still when Beavis looked out of the windows, all dusty and draggled, with the skin and wings of some gnats and dead leaves entangled in it.